There were some calls already coming in, and I had to say, hold on, folks, because there's an important guest in the studio, and I'm going to do that one more time. So if you can call back when I'm done with Mr. Anthony Bouchard, I'll go ahead and open up the phones here. But here's why Anthony's in the studio today. I really did think, Anthony, that when I moved from Florida to here, Florida has a stand your ground law, that Wyoming pretty much invented stand your ground laws. And I was shocked to find out that Wyoming didn't have one, and you're still trying to introduce the thing. So your state senator, Anthony Bouchard, is in the studio with me. How far along have we gotten here?
Well, we have the bill is actually introduced as far as the procedures for the website. It's up online; people can see it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we're getting a lot of support on the outside. We have 4 counties now that actually did resolutions within the GOP party supporting this this bill. To answer your question, though, on why Wyoming doesn't have it, there was a push to do this in 2008, and it was based off of a 2000 case where right here in Cheyenne, a young man named Chase Vossler was actually defending his home from 2 gang-related thugs, and it all got turned around on Mr. Vossler, and he was outside of his home because he ran out to a vehicle to get a gun, came back. The assailant was still trying to beat the front door in. His 14-year-old sister was on the inside at the time, was trying to keep the assailant's hand off of the deadbolt. So it was a vicious attack. The wrong person was made victim, or the victim of the assault was made victim by our system.
So what, because he ran outside of the house? Is that the reason why?
Correct.
Okay.
But we didn't have castle doctrine at the time, so it wouldn't have mattered on the inside either as far as what our law said. So there was a bill introduced back then, and it was a castle doctrine bill, but it had 3 pages of stand your ground on that bill. The problem is the legislature said there would be blood in the streets and all the usual arguments, the sky's going to fall. And so the 3 pages did not, they were scratched from the bill. The bill moved forward as a castle doctrine bill only. More importantly, there's a case that happened in 2016, which is very similar, virtually the same type of case, where the guy was outside of his home, had to defend himself, and he was actually convicted and imprisoned. Fortunately, 2017, he appealed it to the Supreme Court, but it was a technicality, basically an argument that was given to, about he wrongly, the prosecution wrongly used the duty to retreat in the instructions to the jury, and so the Supreme Court overturned it. However, they left some negligence charge on there. And so the problem we have is we're still having these arguments in the court. There isn't case law, and by the way, that's one of the things that's being said now by certain people, that we have case law in Wyoming. I don't. I think the Worland case proves there is no real case law.
And even if you do have precedents in case law, that doesn't mean that the next case is going to go your way. You got to have the law there. Okay, so now help me out a little bit here. If I am arriving here at work and I'm in downtown Cheyenne, for the most part, it's very quiet and peaceful here at 3 in the morning when I pull into the parking lot. But there have been on a couple of occasions in the summertime, I've looked over at some character on a street corner staring at me and wondering what's he's on. What is he on? Am I in any kind of danger here? And I would like the ability to defend myself. So are you saying that if I had to, I could get in trouble?
You could.
Okay.
You could. The problem always becomes, and we've seen this just historically, I'm not going to say that I have a firm case to prove this, but we do see the tendency to be that you'll have prosecutors that'll be either on one side of the spectrum or the other.
Right.
And so I think I've talked to prosecutors that have stopped being prosecutors in the past, and what they've said was it always seems like there is a drive to put another notch on the belt. And so that's where some of these cases, and I would say that's what the Worland case is. It's just a prosecutor putting a notch on his belt, pushing the envelope, making case law, making precedents that we can lock
Okay.
up someone that
So
defended themselves.
what exactly is this bill titled?
Stand your ground.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look at the wording of it next. It's AM 650, KGAB Radio.
AM 650, KGAB.
9:18 is the time. It's AM 650, KGAB Radio. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. So State Senator Anthony Bouchard is sitting in the studio with me. We're talking about a proposal for a Wyoming Stand Your Ground law, which is just titled Stand Your Ground. And is it H file, or how is it numbered?
It's a Senate File 71.
Okay, Senate file 71 is how people can look that up. And is the current form you have here is what's up on the website right now?
Correct.
Okay, because there have been a few changes. So exactly how are you wording this? What does it say?
Well, the bottom line is, and I think this is the best part of to explain the bill is right on page 2. A person who uses reasonable defensive force pursuant to, and it's got the section, shall be immune from any arrest, detention, charging, citation, or prosecution for using defensive force.
Okay, and to be clear again, when you cite that, what someone wrote to say, well, what do you consider reasonable? That's defined.
Yes, actually, so we can go right to that section
Okay.
of the bill if you want to do that.
Yeah.
So let's look at the definition. Reasonable defensive force means the threatened or actual use of force that a reasonable person in like circumstances would judge to be necessary to prevent an injury or loss, and no more, and can include deadly force if such force is necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury to himself or another, or it is reasonable to believe that such force is necessary to resist a like force or threat. So understand, this bill doesn't change where you can have a gun, how you use a gun. I mean, this is just basically saying that this is going to protect you if you notice, it's worded kind of like what a jury or a judge would read.
Right.
You know, a reasonable person would believe that they would have to use this like force against a threat. So it doesn't give any magical powers to someone who uses force. So, and one of the things that's different about this bill and some of the laws in other states, you notice it said threatened or actual, and so you could actually pull a gun out in this state and aim it at a threat,
Right.
and typically what happens, the first one that calls the police wins.
Yeah.
So the criminals know that they can go call the police.
Act like a victim.
Act like a victim and say that this guy pulled a gun on him. So back to that's why the language says threatened or actual use.
Okay, and we both know that your average law-abiding gun owner, in most cases, statistics show, never even fire the gun. They just show the gun.
Yes.
But that could be considered a threat, though, and he could lose in court.
Correct.
Okay. Which I would think, though, that I did the right thing if I thought I was being threatened and I just showed my gun and said, go away, and it worked, that the police would be very happy with me. The prosecutors, the judge, would be happy with me instead of trying to throw me in jail.
You know, it comes back to that whole spectrum of where does a prosecutor, where does his political, where's his heart at on a lot of these prosecutions? So I think they call that brandishing, and in the pure sense of the word brandishing, that's what when you take a gun out and you
threaten
use
somebody.
it wrongly.
Yeah.
I think brandishing is using it wrongly.
Okay.
In this case, this redefines this as you have a threat, and I'm going to do whatever I can to stop that threat. If it so happens that I just show that criminal my gun and he runs, that's the best scenario we can have. And by the way, that I think there was a criminologist, his name was Gary Kleck, I believe. Kleck, maybe? And I remember seeing the statistics. It was like 2%, less than 2%, actually have to actually pull the trigger. Most criminals are afraid of law-abiding citizens with guns. There was even a case in where they interviewed prisoners. I think it was down in Denver. And the prisoners were interviewed and asked, are you more afraid of a police officer or a citizen? And hands down, they said, we're more afraid of a citizen because they'll shoot us.
They'll actually. Well, if a citizen shoots you, he doesn't have to fill out all the paperwork.
Correct.
Well,
Well, but as to the purpose of this bill, it can turn ugly because then they're made the one that's victimized by our system.
Okay, well, you've introduced it, but you've got a long way to go. Let's talk about how far you have to go with this thing. But first, you got your headphones on. Let's grab a call. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone with me?
Good morning, Glenn. Good morning, Anthony. Eric here. Hey, Anthony, would there be a difference if you just drew back your coat rather than draw the weapon? Would that be considered brandishing?
Well, I think brandishing is all meant to be used in a way that if I use my gun and use it wrongfully, I think that's more of a brandish.
Now,
if a criminal's standing there and I pulled my jacket back saying, hey, I'm serious, man. Go
for
away.
That matter, if I'm open carry and I just lean on one hip to let you know here it is, that could be considered the same thing. Now, I remember some years ago I was having a conversation on there with some people about this, and I looked up the dictionary definition at the time of brandishing, and I would actually have to basically wave it around in a threatening way. So just the fact that I opened up my coat and said, just back off, as opposed to I am waving it around in a threatening way was the definition that I read. So that would be brandishing a gun. Or even if, I guess for that matter, if I lifted my coat and I made a threat towards you while pointing to the gun, then that could be considered brandishing because I'm making a threat and showing the gun.
Yes, I think, and I think that is the proper way that brandishing should be used. It's not really done in a lawful way.
Yeah, just having a gun on my belt is not brandishing.
Right.
Yeah, it's the threat that goes with it. Okay, more with Anthony Bouchard in just a moment. So we have the stand your ground. Is bill at this point?
Oh,
is it considered? It's considered a bill.
It's a bill,
okay.
Even though it's called a Senate file.
Okay, and so now you've got to get it. It's not a legislative session; it's a budget session. So you got some hurdles to cross to get it out there on the floor. What happens next?
Well, since it's a budget session, you do have a 2/3 threshold, so that's 20 votes in the Senate. So
that should be easy.
Well, it should be.
Okay.
I mean, this is a bill that will bring a lot of emotional arguments.
Sure.
And sadly, a lot of those emotional arguments don't really have to do with the heart of what's going on with the courts and a victim. So,
well, it's okay. Let's not name names yet, or unless you want to. Are there some people that you worry that will try to block this thing?
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be some.
And that's just to get it out there for a vote. I mean, just to get it out of committee, basically, or into committee.
The good news is everybody's going to vote, and everybody's going to be on the record.
Okay.
So I think there's a positive there, and understand. I'll bring the bill back again,
and again and again
and again.
Let's try to squeeze this call in, but we got like a minute here. This is Glenn. What's your question, real quick?
Hey, Glenn. This is Amy.
Yes.
I just wanted to call and say, well, my question is, emotional arguments, I think, can be very powerful. I mean, when I served, I remember we had when we debated the whole concealed carry for everyone without a permit. I mean, we had people on the floor screaming that their wives were going to be shot in the mall, because of it. It's very difficult to get over it, but I think being rational. So I hope you have a really good strategy for that craziness, and remind people that we had this argument before with concealed carry without a permit, and the last time I checked, no one in Wyoming was shot in the head.
It's a gunfight in the street every single day. Did you miss one downtown Cheyenne just yesterday? Happened high noon. Come on, Amy. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Okay, this is where did they look it up online?
They go to the legislative website, and they'll see a section with 2018 bills.
And it should be right there. Okay, thanks, Anthony. Fox News happens now.